Good morning. We are continuing our Divine Feminine series. And Cassandra and I, each month, have come here on Zoom. We have talked about historical figures, women who are in the Bible, in the Judeo-Christian system of understanding who they are, where their stories might have been diminished, and just so we can learn more about them from outside sources to get a bigger picture and kind of take away like what is the message of that divine feminine. And today we're going to shift gears and we're going to move into the Celtic and we're going to talk about Brigid. And I think this is the perfect time to have the conversation of Brigid because there is a big like feast holiday coming up February 1st to 2nd um, in Balk, and it is about her. So if you have never heard of Brigid or you've heard and you're like, I really don't know about her, welcome. You're going to find a lot about her today. And she's such an interesting character because she was so historically this goddess worshipped within Ireland for just centuries. And then when Christianity came, they realized they could not remove her. And so instead, they embraced her, they created a saint, and they created all of these pieces around her. So, with that, my co host today is Cassandra. I'm going to let Cassandra introduce herself a little, talk a little bit about Brigid with us. And I'm really looking forward to have some of you maybe share if you have information. I know Britt's trying to get logged in, and Britt, I'm sure will want to share as well. But I'm going to first introduce Cassandra and let Cassandra speak.
Hi, I am, as Debbie said, I'm Cassandra. I am just a truth seeker and spreader. So when it comes to religion and cultures, I love diving in. And I thought, and of course, I pronounce it Brigid because that was what my past had revealed as far as the etymology of the word goes. But this is another one of those things where we see a different entity and we look at it differently from different perspectives. So my pronunciation was always Brigid, but for me, I thought that she was a great transition from the Christian Bible that we were looking at in the past couple of months, because as Debbie said, she became a saint in the Catholic world. So and there's different academic dialogues that go on about how she was formed into a saint versus how she moved from a pagan pantheon into the Christian world. But we can share the information and decide what the best truth is for ourselves and see how that applies to our life now and how it looked in history too. So the the thing that I took from Brigid is that she was a poet, a smith, and a healer. She's also seen as a triple goddess in the Irish culture before she became a saint. So when she was kind of integrated into the Catholic Church, she was seen as more than one aspect. So the smith part of her actually kind of comes from Brigantia. They think that she as the Romans pushed the British Celts out and they kind of moved into Ireland territory, they kind of adapted this war goddess Brigantia that they had, which goes into the Brigid pronunciation too. But it moves into this, okay, let's adapt this woman, let's adapt this goddess into our pantheon too. So the poet and healer that was associated with fire and water and abundance, and even she had oxen that she carried with her. So she had her hands in animals, she had her hands in healing, and she had her hands in poetry and creativity. So there were so many aspects of this Irish goddess that turned into a Catholic saint who was still associated with healing that we can pull into our everyday life now. And I'm so excited to talk about her because for me, when I was researching this different culture, this Celtic culture that goes very different from my Southern Methodist church upbringing, it was like, oh, there is a healing wisdom aspect to ancient goddesses that we kind of lost along the way, which is kind of where we're seeing some of this reemerge with our new age religions that have come up. But we see how we can take this wisdom like we did with Sophia and we can put it into our lives. And the smithing part of her triple goddess aspect also doesn't necessarily adhere to let's make something, but it adheres to the spark of the flame of that smithing. So I would love to hear if other people have experience with this goddess slash saint if they've had any past anyone in the room, you're welcome to talk at any time. You can raise your hand or just pipe in. But from what I remember as a child, learning what other goddesses were like, Brigid basically was this flame to me. When I learned about her initially, I saw pictures of a woman holding flames. I did see the cross that we have mentioned before this talk started that represents her. And in Celtic history, they would form this cross once a year. And every February 1st, they would take down the old and put up the new that she would bless as she visited the homes. And again, I would love to hear if anyone else had heard this story too. But basically, we take this triple goddess who in the pantheon was potentially had two sisters, and that's where the idea of three women came into play, three Brigids that turned into one Brigid. But basically, she represented fire and water and the healing springs of water. So the spark, the flame of creativity, and the healing and the wisdom that comes along with diving into your creative pursuits. And that's kind of the overview of Brigid that I got when I first started learning about it. But Debbie, I know that you have 5 pages. How many? Actually, you said 9 pages of notes. And I would love to hear what type of history you dove into. You're muted, by the way.
Sorry, I was requesting a coffee from my husband, so I muted. Can you bring me a coffee? Um, so I want to start with this. If this is your introduction to her, like this is just who, just know that she was a goddess never meant to be forgotten. She was powerful, she was so beloved, and she was so necessary to that culture. Excuse me, that again, as we both have said, Christianity arrived and they could not erase her. And they rebranded her. There was a little bit of rebranding going on. They did a little bit of renaming and made her a saint. But her fire and her story and what she means to her people and what she can apply that to us, because most of us have a little Irish in us. Like the Irish prolifically spread their genetic DNA across the land. But just let that land and move and let that move her story into you and hear that in her story because she is her own pantheon, right? Celtic goddess primarily Ireland, again, triple goddess. And I'm going to just touch on a few of these points. The goddess of hearth and home. So, very important, very much about your daily life and daily activities, right? It wasn't just somebody that, I think within Christianity, people show up on a Sunday and worship and then they're done and they go somewhere else. Like she was in their everyday lives. She was a goddess of healing, poetry, creativity, inspiration. Again, the smith craft and the ironworks and sacred fire. So all these pieces we've met. And already we see something kind of very different from the narrow boxes that women were put into. She was not just one thing, she was many. She was not quiet, she was creative. She was not passive, she was powerful. She was not hidden. She was a very huge central figure, so central to the culture. I want you to understand and think of the colonization of this world and how the colonizers came in, the Europeans came in, and oftentimes just wiped out complete everything, culture, everything, and replaced it. And she was irreplaceable. Think of that. She was irreplaceable. And so, yeah, they kind of shifted her in a few ways, but irreplaceable. And she was part of this kind of ancient divine race in the Irish mythology. She was the daughter of Dagda this is like the most powerful god. She's not a minor, she's not a little side piece. She is not secondary, she's not a side character. So many times through history, these very prolific female, divine feminine were really later erased into these side stories, and hers was not erasable.
And
Like that is powerful right there. at talking about the divine feminine, you can't get any more powerful than that, that she could not be erased or set to the side, right? So, um, she's like central to life, creation, survival. Again, fire, wells, fertility, protection, inspiration, transformation. She is like the goddess of life force. And so she then, I want you to think now, Christianity comes in, and like how did they take this on? Like what did they do? This is where it gets really fascinating, but like again, very telling to her power of how she was so prolific in their everyday lives. She was present with them always. She was part of everyday living. So they encountered people who were just deeply devoted to her. Again, not a fringe goddess, not a somebody I'm going to worship one day a week. She was so beloved, integrated into every piece of what they did. They prayed to her, honored her, worked with her energy in all things, in their cooking, in their creating, in their storytelling, in their everything. And then they decided, okay, we're going to have a rebellion here because people were rebelling. Like they're like, she's not going away. So the church did something really strategic, as most times it does. They turned her into Saint Brigid of Kildare. So, same name. They kept the same day that she was celebrated and made it a feast day. There were some sacred sites to her. They kept those the same, and the same associations of healing, fire, and protection. And her sacred flame at Kildare, they have a sacred flame, is tended by priestesses for generations, becomes a covenant where nuns tend to this eternal flame. And this is really not coincidence. This is completely like we got to adapt, and she's here. So she has been this prominent figure again and again and again and again.
And
And
something
these
to note
like,
that the fact that she still remains so prominent, the Druids, the Celts, they didn't write things down. Like in Greek religion, you have the theogony that was written down by Homer, or it was written down by someone. And again, these were oral traditions that lasted over time, but nothing was written down about Brigid. So we don't have the actual text. We're going off of oral history that was passed down, and it was so prolific that yes, they still had to adapt it. Now there are a couple of academic scholars that question how she was introduced into the Christian mythology too, because even her being introduced as a saint, they used the word brig and brige as a an exalted name. So they use that for people that were exalted. The etymology of Brigid means the exalted one. So they were using this name, and there's a story that about a child that was born who helped actually resurrect a child that was died that had passed away, and that's one potential story of how she became a saint, because they named this. There's actually a skull that they've kept in one of the monasteries that they believe is Saint Brigid. So they've named someone that they thought was so important based off of the history of the entire land that was never written down, that they said, okay, we've got to incorporate her into this. In your, like you said, she could not be forgotten. She adapted into a different world, which is also something for us to look into. Is like how can we take something that was so different and adapt it into something else that's completely different, which I mean, we can use in our everyday life too. If we're looking at these different cultures and different goddesses and what they can bring to the table, there's so much about her, like the poetry, the smithing, the fire, but the adaptability to me was also one that kind of an undercurrent of how she moved from one culture into another and took it over in a way. Exactly. She just moved right through. So it was just, I found that quite interesting how important she was, despite the fact that her name wasn't written down. It was just spread throughout. And back to, I got excited about that. I almost feel like interrupted. So back to what you're saying. But if people want to kind of look into, it's Tuat de Danann, which is kind of like the Greek theogony and kind of like our Genesis of our Christian Bible. It's the pantheon of the Celtic gods and goddesses that the Druids kind of looked into. And yes, she was the daughter of Dagda, but also the lover of Dagda. So that's also an interesting aspect of how important she was in that particular mythology, and still moved over into a Christian mythology too. It,
Right, because a lot of these ancient mythologies and systems had that piece of parent child, sister brother, like keeping that within. So it's very interesting how those stories evolve, and that's very historically how these pantheons are described. Um, I want to talk just briefly, well, not briefly. I don't want to be anything brief about this. I want to open this all up. Um, I want to talk about Imbolc and the celebration that was her festival. So this is like the beginning of February. So this is the midpoint of winter, the very midpoint of winter, February 1st, and it means in the belly. That word physically means in the belly. So I want you to think about in the belly is that that gestation period before birth. And when is birth? Spring, right?
it
So
was
the
when
seed has been sown, and all winter the seed is growing in the belly. And spring is when everything is going to come to life. So this celebration was marking the first stirrings of spring. So thinking of when the first feeling of movement and life within the belly, the first signs of life beneath the soil, the time when the sheep would kind of begin to lactate, the time when the light was going to return. So the days start becoming a little bit longer, the light is coming back. This is not full bloom. This is not harvest. This is the potential. Okay. So it's think of new beginnings, quiet awakening, that stirring of the first feeling of movement. Um, Internal stirrings within yourself and sacred readiness, preparation. What happens when a woman is about to have a baby and she's feeling those first stirrings of life and she's realizing, oh, there really is a child within me. She's planning. She's preparing for that child to come. So there's this sacred readiness of knowing what is going to come. And your life will never be the same after the birth of that child, right? So she is kind of like looking over this threshold, and this celebration is to celebrate all of that, the new beginnings, the quiet awakenings, the stirring. And so she's the goddess of that in between, the not yet, but the becoming, which I love, Britt, because your word of the year for 2026 is becoming and working on that becoming. And I so like, I just you and finding your little clovers, and you are like like the Fey Druid Celtic. I have so felt that for you, and I don't know. I would like to pause, and if you'd like to come off mic and share anything, you're good. Okay, she's like, I'm good. Because I feel all that energy of like you have a connectedness so much. And I think I've even told you before, like she came through for you. I'm pretty sure one time when I did maybe Reiki or something, like she really was coming through for you in that. And I was like, oh, I don't know if you even connect to this, but I was telling people before I started recording, you had just sent me a picture of the cross, the knot cross, and that your aunt brought that to you.
from
It's
Ireland.
woven from Ireland.
From Ireland. It's from the Rushes in her name from those that worship her. And so she had it in her house. She was moving. And I said, oh, what are you doing with that? I was just inspired to work with her. And she's Wiccan. And she said, well, it's yours, darling. And so it's been up in my house. It's the center of my altar in my front room. So I thought that was fantastic. I recently found out that my great grandfather was a Druid and that his sister was also a Druid, and they did that in secret. And they taught my aunt, and my mother completely was a Christian. So she rebuked my aunt, and we never grew up around her. And so I'm creating this new relationship of who am I deep down inside, and who are my ancestors, and what are they telling me? So I have always looked for clovers. I've always been a little wood fairy. I just that's just who I am. So finding out that my blood runs really true as far as like I've been my generations have been doing this. This is true to who I am. I've just embraced that in my adult 40s. And yeah, it's like coming home to myself and learning the history, like Brigid and all of the powerful women um, that have the stories are just examples of everyday women and all of our stories combined. And I find it inspirational. So thank you guys. Okay, I'm going to be quiet now.
No, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And, in the stories we have shared in this series so far and the different women, so many times they were diminished, right? Every woman we have spoke of, I mean, Mother Mary's very kind of exalted in the Catholic Church. So that's not an example, but Mary Magdalene and Deborah and Sophia and all these were very much diminished. And here you have somebody that was like reshaped to fit a system because she was not to be erased, right? And again, there's not a lot of written history on her. It was all oral history, but she was so embedded and so powerful. And so think of all the women who have been renamed, reshaped, redefined to fit systems that were never built for their fullness. She kind of stands and is like, I reclaim it. Because even though Christianity came in and made her this saint, I feel today she is more in her fullness to her original piece than the Christian, Saint, Bridget or Saint Brigid or, I think today she's more and more in her fullness. I think people are really connecting with her because she is an everyday person who is there, hearth and home, the fire within, the light within you. She is asking you for all of this. And I think it's so powerful. We're leading into this February 1st
Exactly.
and this festival of her. And so when Cassandra and I were having the discussion, and Cassandra's like, this is what I'm thinking. I'm like, 100% yes. Like we are moving into her festival time. This is the time to talk about her. And so if this is sparking interest in you, and we're going to keep talking, we're not done, but if this is sparking interest, I really, do more research, look more into her, and get to know her more because I think her message is like unstoppable. Um, and, they may try to shift my story, but I'm going to come back in my fullness 100%. And I really feel like she has done that. Cassandra, more things you wanted to share because you have all these great historical little facts that I'm loving that I hadn't even heard before, but I did a lot of research on her and I've, I didn't really know a lot about the Celtic pantheon and I didn't know a lot of these, and I've heard some stories and we've seen things in depicted maybe in movies and hearing who's, but I think truly she is just, I'm loving her as an example to us. And I'll be quiet, let Cassandra talk because when I wrap this up at the end, I really want to talk about how we can embody her and how she speaks to work with us. And yeah, so carry on.
Well, I love this as a discussion too. I mean, we this back and forth I think is actually the best part of it because we
Hmm.
other. And when it comes to like Brigid, the all of the little things that I found, I loved everything. For instance, the eternal flame that we've kind of talked about, we touched on it just for a moment, but apparently the eternal flame goes way beyond what when she was adapted as a saint, as a Christian saint, a Catholic saint, excuse me. They were maintaining this eternal flame in her oh gosh, my brain just stopped in the monastery essentially that they had for her, but the Brigantine sisters were the ones that were maintaining it, and I thought it was kind of neat that there was a tidbit that basically said that there were hedges that surrounded this flame, this temple, and men weren't allowed to pass the hedges because they were believed to go mad the moment that they passed through the hedges. So the eternal flame of Brigid basically says no man shall enter here. But that alone is so interesting because she was exalted so high that you had to have femininity in you to be able to approach that flame, to approach that eternal flame, because there were plenty of flames out there for men too. So there were other things that were meant for them, but this was meant for the woman, for a woman to go and gather all of this warmth and, like you said, the hearth from her. But the other thing that I thought was just kind of neat about her is that she, I mean, there are so many people that still go back to her, like you're talking about in our new age. We've kind of rekindled this relationship with some of these ancient gods and goddesses, and her being one of them, like her being in charge of abundance of animals. I mean, the little things like that. When we talk about this being the bud of spring, pretty much, they would honor her because she brought forth food. She brought forth abundance. There's a couple of stories of her miracles in some of the Catholic, like, that's how they decided that she could become a saint, because the miracles that she performed, one being essentially kind of like resurrecting a child, another being that she turned water to beer, which I found quite interesting since we've talked about Sophia, we've talked about Jesus. And there were a lot of miracles that she performed that kind of went along with what Jesus had done in his own in a different part of the world. So it's interesting that we can see this happen with a woman doing it in Northern Ireland culture or Irish culture. So those things alone, I just thought were very, very neat. But the war goddess aspect of her too proves that she could not only be soft with her womanhood, with her femininity, but she could be incredibly strong. And that's where some of the combination of goddesses comes into play, where we bring in this Britannica, this Britain goddess, the Brigantia versus Brigid. So we pull in some of these different aspects, but we pull in what we need, especially at that time. Women were seen sometimes as being a little bit weak, but okay, let's look at this goddess and see how strong she was and what she could bring to the table. And along with that softness, there's a story of her where she in the Tuatha Dé Danann, she loses her child. And so she brings about this form. I don't know if you've heard, it's keening. So it's where you sing and cry over your dead. And that alone to me is magic. When you bring honor to someone that has passed, but also honor to yourself for the loss, that's something that she brought to the table. So she's the origin of this tradition that Ireland has had for a very long time of singing and crying. And so wailing can be seen as what it is, but it's essentially letting all of your addressing and letting all of your emotions out for something that's really important. And that is something that I think we have to remember today, because we're so caught up in our scrolling and caught up in every like tiny little thing that needs to be taken care of and paid attention to, that we forget to really focus on what's important. And that includes losing things, because death is the only thing that we can guarantee in part as a part of life, is that we know that this will come. And she was a goddess that said, hey, it's okay to do this. It's okay to take a moment and really focus on how you're feeling and how you can move through these emotions. So she was the spark, the flame, the poet, the smith, and I don't know, the empathizer. She's the one that helped us move through our own emotions. So those were like the little pieces of story that I found quite interesting. But I do have a goddess oracle deck that whenever we were talking about going through some of the lists that I gave you were included in this. But this is the picture of Brigid that it portrays. There's three females with one flame coming from their head, and she's got a harp, she's got flowers, so the goddess of abundance. But basically, her tagline is inspiration. And I did want to read just a little bit of what this says, because it does have a poem that goes along with her story. And she says, "Let me come to you through the mist, through the fire, through the plants, through the deep flowing wells, with ideas, visions, words, music beyond the tips of your ears. Let me move you, enliven you, stimulate you, till your perspective shifts and your mind, body, spirit explodes. You are left standing in the wake of what has been revealed, and life feels very sweet." So to me, when I was researching Brigid, I mean, obviously I have little bits and bits of information from past time, but all I could think of that she is the spark and she is the flame. And sometimes we just need to dive into that. So that's kind of the little tidbits I have. Did you have anything else, Deb, that you wanted to add to her little?
Well, I want to play upon a point you had just made that I think is so key. And that was the wailing over, crying over in your morning. And again, the permission to feel the emotion and allow it, not stifle it. How many of us were told as a child to not cry, to be quiet? How many of us were told to shove those feelings down? And she is saying, no, honor all of that. And how healthy is that? This is why she also, for some, is kind of like she helps people heal sometimes from religious trauma. She helps people heal from mother wounds and childhood wounds or our histories being silenced because she truly is about bringing in and telling you it's okay. Honor that. Honor your emotions. Honor your grief. Honor those things. And that's very different from, suck it up, buttercup, and shove those feelings down. No. So I think that's really beautiful telling us that we can honor that. I think that's really lovely. Um, so here's the question. I always like to bring this up when we're doing these discussions. How is she symbolic for me today? How can I mean, obviously we're talking about that, but she symbolizes the parts of us that were creative before we were told to be practical, right? And shove that creativity down. She is the parts of us that were intuitive before we were told to be logical. This is where they try to erase us in our creativity, our intuitiveness, our expression, our power. We were expressive, and then we were told to be quiet. We were powerful, and then we were told to be pleasing, to be acceptable, right? To diminish who we are for the comfort of others. She is a reminder of the woman who knows. She is a reminder of the woman who creates. She is the reminder of the woman who heals, and she is the reminder of a woman who does not ask permission. No asking permission. She is especially powerful for us, like again, healing from religious trauma, mother wounds, histories being silenced, because she is literally a goddess who was renamed and reshaped, right? And the world, we came into this world and the world tried to rename us and reshape us and tell us how we had to be. There is this domestication that happens for us. But we are not to be domesticated. We are meant to be set free. So she's showing up and you're hearing about her to tell you to let go of what the world told you to be and connect to who you truly are, the creative, the intuitive, the expressive, the powerful, right? She stands to remind you to reclaim yourself. So how can we embody her, right? And this is where the practical becomes super grounded, okay? So pay attention. Honor, honor your creativity. And if you're like, I'm not a creative person, there is some creativity within you. Whether you are creative in how you decorate your home, whether you're creative on how you cook a meal, or you take a recipe and you zhuzh it up. Maybe you are an artist. Maybe you paint. Maybe you sew. Maybe you garden. There's creativity in everyday living on how you express yourself. So honor your creativity, even when it's messy, even when it's inconvenient, even when it doesn't make money, because maybe you're an artist and you're like, I don't make a lot of money off this. How can you be creative in other ways? Creativity is not about earning an income from it. It's about living your expression. And it is sacred. Excuse me, it is sacred in her lineage. Number two, honor your healing, your own and excuse me, I have a little bit of GERD and that coffee's just kind of um honor your own healing and honor it in others. Rest is not weakness, sensitivity is not fragility, care is not lesser work. In fact, care and the divine feminine being the caretakers and the caregivers is sacred work, the most important work we can possibly do. And this is why when women come together in community, how powerful it is. Because when our energies come together, and I love the sacred flame in the hedge, and it was meant for the divine feminine, like how powerful is that? And how powerful are when we support one another? And when we have each other's back, and when we're feeling, one of us is feeling low and down, the rest of us are like rallying around. What can we do? How can I help? You're not feeling well. You need rest. What can I do to help you? Somebody has a baby and it's all hands on deck. They say it takes a village. It takes a village. My daughter said nothing is more humbling at 30 than calling your mommy to come help you. But she's like, I would do it time and time again, right? You lean in on that community. Number three, honor your fire, honor your spark, honor your light. What ignites you? What excites you? Again, that can fall into your creativity. Honor your anger. Yes, you heard me right. Honor
Yes.
your anger, your sacred rage. If you have sacred rage of what is happening in the world, honor it. Honor it, feel it, hone it in, and know what is important to you and honor that. Honor your passion. Honor your boundaries of what you say is okay and is not okay, what is for you and not for you. Honor your no. Honor that no. No, thank you. Not for me. Honor your truth. Your fire is your anger, your passion, your boundaries, your no, your truth, your yes. Honor that. She is not only the fire of the hearth within the home, because that was important to them to have that fire to cook by, to warm the home, but it is the fire within you, right? And she is the fire that forges, right? Fire can be so metamorphic and change. Imagine you take all these foods, you take the carrots, the onions, the celery, and you put it all in the soup pot with all the foods, and all those things on their own are just okay, but you put them in there and you forge them with some fire, and it creates a beautiful, delicious, fantastic meal. And then the metalworks forged in the fire to create. Fire is part of creation. It is part of actually taking something and making it even better, refined. She melts, she reshapes, she transforms. How can you melt, shape, and transform? And maybe you need to really focus on her and what she brings to the table to remind you to do those things, to remind you to do that. So, to embody her is to stop apologizing for being a multidimensional, beautiful, amazing, unique, divine creation. Let me say that again. Stop apologizing for who you are. Be unapologetic, be unbothered. It is to say, I am tender, but I am strong. I am soft, but I am fierce. I am intuitive, and I am intelligent. I am spiritual, and I am embodied all at once. So, what would her message be for you today? If you want, like, I want you to think about, like, okay, what is the one takeaway? Remember who you were before you were told who you had to be. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's the message. Or how about this? Your fire was never meant to be tamed. It was meant to be tended. Take that. Wait, just take that in again. Your fire was never meant to be tamed, but it was meant to be tended. They have that eternal flame that they are tending to, that holy space. There is a holy fire within you. Are you tending to it or are you taming it? You are not meant to be tamed, you are meant to be tended. And that fire, that spark, that creativity, that healing, all of that is to be tended to, not to be tamed. I'm getting to the last page. Sorry, I've got a lot to say. So maybe this is your message. You're not here to fit in, you're here to create. Maybe your message today is you're allowed to take up space in your own life. Maybe your message today is you're not too much, you are powerful. And if somebody says you're too much, they're not for you. You are not to change and acquiesce to that. Maybe this is your message of the day. You do not need permission to be who you are becoming. What are you becoming? Who are you becoming? That message has been strong this month. And I feel like Britt has kind of sparked that message of becoming. Like it has been so ingrained in me, and that's her word of the year. And I love that word becoming. So her energy is deeply about self-trust. It's about not needing external validation. It's not needing approval. It's not about obedience. It is self-trust. Tend that flame, which is very much aligned in the work that I do to remind you every day of who you are, of who you are. You are a divine creation. I tell you this every day on my morning live. So she's not just some ancient goddess, some person of the past. She is an archetype, a remembering, a mirror to you. She lives in every woman who's reclaiming her voice, her creativity, her intuition, her truth. She lives in every person who's choosing to live with their inner fire instead of an external expectation. I think this is a really beautiful message. So, where have you felt your fire dim? Are you being called to create? Are you ready to reclaim yourself? And maybe this is somebody you need to like really focus on. Maybe there's something like you're feeling that stirring inside of you, and that birth is coming, and it's time to get ready for that birth of what is the rebirth of who you are becoming. And maybe this February 1st, you're going to have a whole new celebration in your life. And maybe there's going to be a whole new feast you're going to celebrate for you, to celebrate you, who you are becoming, what you are about to birth, what is coming within you, tending to your flame. And so I'm interested to know if anybody has like felt that, or if any of these statements I've made have really resonated with you today. And I'd love to open it up and ask anyone their thoughts on this, because I'm interested to hear if this is something that has kind of stirred it within you today. Because I'm telling you, the more I connect and talk about her, I get a little fired up myself. Anybody have any thoughts?
I love that she was a blacksmith right? A blacksmith? A
Blacksmith and gold.
blacksmith, period, is a person to be reckoned with, let alone a woman.
Yes.
So,
Black
woo, that's
goldsmith.
some power.
Yeah, that is. Because that wasn't typically a woman's role, right? Again, she's not telling you, don't fit her in a box, don't fit yourself in a box, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. If anybody else wants to share, I would love to open up. If not, Cassandra, do you have any closing thoughts?
Well, I mean, I do want to recommend some reading if people are
Yes, please.
this book is called Wild Magic. It's a solo practitioner's diary essentially for Celtic traditions. And so Danu Forrest she's got so many degrees that I could list all of her alphabetics behind her name, but she dives into Celtic history. So this is where I got some of my information. But she talks about fire, like the fire festivals, including February 1st. So adding, like having just a little fire that you kind of honor and take a moment to honor with. And then you have to excuse my birds, but there's also a Celtic tree oracle that I use that is based off of the old Ohm alphabet, which dives into how each tree goes with each month and how we can connect with that part of the, like Britt has said, the woods, that part of nature, how there's wild within us that we've almost forgotten. And so diving into the Celtic stuff, it's my favorite because I too have that history, Britt. When I did my ancestry stuff, it just mostly came from the Celts. Like wherever they believed in fairies, that's where my family was. And so diving into it made me feel more connected too, because I do I, Britt? But diving into the, like, what connects us to nature, what connects us to fire, water, earth, spirit. So those are the things that kind of brought about inspiration to me when I was reading on Brigid. And when it comes to just the fire itself, you talk about our word for the year, mine was Phoenix. Because to me, diving into just reigniting after a bunch of things have fallen away, reigniting and finding that spark and that flame after not feeling like we have anything left, after we feel like we've really truly hit rock bottom, we can find a way to spark it again. We can find a way to to come up with something new that's beautiful from the old. So that's kind of where I was so excited to cover Brigid, because there have been times in my life where I have truly felt like I could not come from these ashes anymore. But then I found a spark somewhere, and that might be in this community with the women that have helped spark that flame too, with people around that have truly shown how they can rise from their own ashes. This inspiration, it can come from every aspect of our life, from the people, from man-made things, and from the nature when we go and we connect with what's already been there for thousands of years before us. So just going out and finding where you can get that spark, even if you don't feel like you've got it anymore, it's there. So that's the only thing I have left to say about Bridget.
I love that. I think this is a great message. I am so excited. I was excited when you said, this is what I was thinking. I'm like, yes, the timing is perfect. The message of now is perfect. It just felt so intuitively like a yes within every cell of my body. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for hanging out with us today. Thank you, Cassandra, for what you shared, and Britt as well. And we do this once a month, and it's a free event. And I love for you guys to be part of the conversation. And as we go through and do more, next month we are doing Kuan Yin. I absolutely love Kuan Yin, the Buddha of passion, of compassion, of compassion. And so I felt like February is, Valentine's Day and love. And I just thought she has this message of compassion. So next month we'll be talking about Kuan Yin. And this is Kuan Yin right here. Kuan Yin. A friend of mine sent that to me, was in her Kuan Yin healing room, and she said, she had to like shut down her place, and she's like, my guide said, you got to mail that to Debbie. So she has a special place in my heart. We're going to learn about her history and the message that she can take away from us. So I hope your fire is going to be tended to. I hope you feel empowered by the message of today, and I hope that there's great takeaways for you. I'm always willing to carry the conversation more outside of this space. And thank you all for being here. Thank you so much. If you're rewatching this, you're welcome to put comments and questions in. We're happy to answer them. Have a wonderful day, you guys. Thanks for being here. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.